Let's kick it off. I'm your host, Steve, and I'm joined by Ash, Jamie Jackson, the Guardian's Manchester football correspondent, and Steve, representing the prominent Manchester United fan group, the 1958. We haven't even played a match this weekend, and yet Manchester United have dominated the front pages over the last week. Jim Ratcliffe, United's co-owner, sparked major backlash after telling Sky News the UK has been colonised by immigrants. He added, "You can't have an economy with 9 million people on benefits and huge levels of immigrants coming in. I mean, the UK has been colonised. It's costing too much money." He also cited population figures to support this argument, saying the population of the UK was 58 million in 2020. Now it's 70 million. That's 12 million people. However, according to the Office for National Statistics, the UK population was 66.7 million in mid-2020 and 69.4 million in mid-2025, meaning Jim's figures were incorrect. The comments were condemned by Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Chancellor Rachel Reeves, and Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham. The 1958 described the remarks as very ill-advised and criticised Sir Jim for commenting on national issues while living in Monaco. Ratcliffe later said, "I'm sorry that my choice of language has offended some people, but it is important to raise the issue of controlled and well-managed immigration that supports economic growth." Manchester United responded by reaffirming their inclusive and welcoming values. So, this isn't just a football story, it's political, it's commercial, it's reputational. So Jamie, we'll start with you. When did you first get wind of this interview, and what was your immediate reaction when you saw those comments?
Yeah, was it a Wednesday? City played Fulham. So last Wednesday, was it? I think it was, wasn't it? Last Wednesday.
Yes, it was,
last Wednesday. And I just came across the sort of clip on X. And yeah, my reaction was quoted, the interview, sort of like the URL on X and just went, wow. And then I had another look at it and went, wow again. Because I think, I don't know, you can be polite at this, or you could be kind of more raw, but first thing is he comes across as a lot less intelligent than maybe some people might think he is, because he's got lots of money. But it goes to show to me, because I wasn't that surprised. Just because you've got lots of money, you can be sort of smart at one thing, but you're not necessarily smart in other areas, or generally what I would call sort of like intelligent. And when I say that, I mean sort of just, you read a lot, you sort of, you've had quite a lot of different life experiences. You've met a lot of different sort of people. You've maybe had different jobs, whatever it is that's allowed you to sort of experience quite a lot of variety of, existing, life. So I wasn't that surprised, but at the same time, I was like, okay, colonized by immigrants. I mean, call me like an old hippie or something. Aren't we all immigrants of the world? People might think that sounds cheesy, but we're all from the world. For me, And listen, he's allowed his point of view, but I just think, or I just thought, and I still think that, you take it back to football just for a second. Your team is full of, people not necessarily from these shores, whatever that means. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just seems really, really odd. And sort of talking to some people since, sort of involved with the squad, and you can imagine at the football club. I mean, listen, there is a constituency of people who think he got it right because they're basically, they don't like outsiders. And again, I'm being polite. I'm using a polite phrase there, yeah? And those people, for me, well, they're thick and they're wrong. But most people I sort of talked to were like, that's gone down like the proverbial. And it's interesting you mentioned the Manchester United statement. I mean, I've got like a sort of a bit of a rule in life. If you don't know the answer to something, it's down to money. If you do know the answer to something, it's down to money. Now, I think they put that statement out partly because it's commercially damaging. Yeah. I'm not saying there aren't amazing good people at Manchester United, right? But, to come out against the sort of largest minority owner in that way says to me there's a commercial thing. And it's also interesting you mentioned about Starmer there, right? Because the last time I had a look or was aware, Ratcliffe sort of new wider Old Trafford regeneration project, we wouldn't call it, relies on government money, right? So, it's quite interesting that he was asked in that interview. And then you go on to like how he supports, or he seemed to sort of be a fan of Nigel Farage. I mean, I'm sorry, that's up to him. But if you want a figure that's anti-Manchester, anti-football, as maybe we all would like to think of football as a sort of game that's accessible to all people, and Farage is not about that. And I could go on and on, but that's a flavour of how I sort of feel about it.
Yeah, interesting. And I think no one saw this coming, obviously, because we played West Ham away on the Tuesday. Actually got a decent result, last minute winner. We didn't play that well, but you pulled out a result. So obviously following the 4 wins in a row from Carrick, so everyone's thinking, oh, we'll have a nice little 2 weeks here and refresh the batteries, etc. So Steve, again, from your perspective, when those quotes came out, again, initial reaction from you. I know you put the statement out, but yeah, I guess what was your thoughts behind the scenes?
I was actually driving home from work, and Chris Wheeler sent me a voice note. He's like, "Steve, have you seen this?" And I'm like, "I'm in the car, mate. What is it?" And he sent me a grab of the quote, and I must have had a look at it about 3 or 4 times trying to digest it. And it's like, my message back to him, I just sent him a voice note saying, "Look, I'm in the car and I'll have a look at it properly when I get home." I said, "But is this reliable? Is it real?" It seems so ridiculous. It was, and it would have been bad enough from our point of view, as in us Man United fans. But then he actually went on and brought the club into the conversation. If I get that he was a business summit, whatever it was, where he was, but I just think his choice of language was absolutely, it was off the scale, and it was, it's. I think, being honest, I think everything that's ever come out of his mouth in public, as I don't think it's been ill advised, because I just don't think he listens to anybody, because everything he's done is, it's not been factually correct. He gave us the spiel when he did after we had the Arsenal protest. Then the day after, lo and behold, he's got 2 interviews lined up, and he starts spouting on about how the stadium's going to be started in the summer. Here's the new stadium. It's going to be started in the summer. Well, it's not. You don't even know the land you want to put it on for a start. And everything like Jamie said, you can be extremely wealthy and thick, because I think publicly he comes across as a very naive and stupid human being, especially for somebody that is. I know he lives in Monaco, obviously for his own personal reasons, but for somebody that supposedly comes from the area and know the area, that Manchester was built on immigration. From the industry, everything. It's something we're proud of as a city, and I don't know. I was speechless when I saw it, and then Chris asked us a few questions, so we threw together a press release for him and sent that out to sort of everyone else, and that was it. There was just an utter bedlam everywhere you looked, from, like you said, the Prime Minister, and as Jamie said, he's touting the area to be regenerated, and the 2 people he seemingly pissed off within the government was Andy Burnham, and the Prime Minister himself, and it's just like, I speechless with it all, absolutely speechless.
Yeah. And Ash, same question to you. Just the initial reaction when you saw this unfolding last week.
Yeah, I think it was similar to the guys. I actually saw a screenshot from you, Steve, with the quote. And after I kind of digested it, in terms of my eyes looked at it, I was like, okay, I think he said that. And a bit like Steve, it's like, did he really say that? I kind of had the same thought as Jamie. To be fair, I've actually heard this type of stuff from him before, because he's spoken about immigration before, but I think that's where the line, he went over the line with the colonized comment, right? And that's where a lot of fans and the public in general have taken massive offense to, right? Because you got truth tellers now saying Jim's right, but I don't think they quite understand the connotations of the word, colonized. And obviously, you can go off the Oxford Dictionary and say that is happening in this country, but it's a loaded word. The historical context, whether you're talking about empire, where we're from continent-wise, Steve, Asia, Africa. So, it's a loaded word, and it's in line with everything that Jim Ratcliffe has done over the last 2 years, the way he spoke. I mean, Steve mentioned before about his quotes in general, it reminded me of like when he said, if he didn't come in, Manchester United would have run out of money. It's just like absolute nonsense, the talk. And this is the guy who was in favour of Brexit, who voted for Brexit, aligned himself with Boris Johnson, then left the country in 2020 to go to Monaco and be a resident. And he's not the only billionaire who's done that, right? James Dyson's done the same. He moved his HQ to Singapore. So I can't, echo the sentiments of the lads already in saying that you can be extremely rich, but you can be insanely thick at the same time, especially if it's an area that you don't know anything about. He's made his money in chemicals, but he has no clue about football, and he has no clue on, what this country needs. If he did care, then he would pay his taxes in this country, and instead of building out plants in Europe, bring some more jobs to the UK if it means that much to you. But yeah, I'll keep you on my soapbox for a long time, Steve, talking about other people who have commented. But what about yourself? What did you think? Initial reactions?
Again, obviously, I think surprise is the common theme from all of us. And again, double taking. I think even in the interview, is it Ed Conway, Sky News? He gave him a chance. He said colonized, double checked it, and he doubled down Jim. And I think you can kind of see in the background someone from Ineos trying to shut down the interview because I think they realised the gravitas of what he was saying at that point. So, look, in terms of politically, we all have our views. You can get into a whole political argument, but I think the issue here is he doesn't realise the magnitude of his words and the position he's in as a co-owner of Manchester United. The fact that he didn't even foresee these issues, prior to saying it. The apology, can we even call it an apology? I mean, I'm sorry you're offended. That's the classic,
to the people, some of the people, right?
Yeah, it's your problem, right? Not mine. And didn't even apologize for getting the incorrect data. So it's like, it's making me think, is it this type of dodgy data that's leading to the decisions of Ten Hag and Ashworth and Amorim? You question everything. So yeah, absolutely baffling in terms of, him saying it, and the backlash has been huge. So Jamie, you touched on it in terms of the squad. I want to just dive into there initially. What do you think the reaction of the squad is going to be? The reaction of the squad is, because obviously you touched on it, obviously immigrants within the team, within the club. I think we all probably are aware of the story of Ahmad and his background, how he came into Europe, etc. So what do you think the club's reaction is going to be? Michael Carrick, maybe you've had some early, chats with the club. So how's that looking on that side?
Yeah, I mean, because of when it occurred, haven't had a chance to see Carrick. We'll see him on Friday, and I mean, I don't know whether the subject will definitely come up, and by the time it becomes my turn, because it's a Monday game, so there'll be an embargoed bit, so I'll go in that part. So what I'm saying is, maybe the question will have been asked by then. I'd be absolutely staggered if, for example, someone like Simon Stone, BBC,
be the first question, surely.
Yeah. But so I will listen to what's said, how he responds, and sort of broaden it out, sort of address what else you said. On the one hand, I would guess, players aren't as, players are a bit smarter than maybe some people think they are, and there'll be different sort of reactions. But I'm guessing, well, I'm not guessing because of what I've been told. There'll be a range of like, oh my god, what the F word, as he said, to, wow, this guy. And then there'll be others who are sort of like, well, that's owners for you sort of thing. I just feel that, Pep Guardiola has a rule at City, right, which is the only person that speaks for Manchester City, apart from, in a mix on, in a flash interview after a game, is Pep Guardiola. So that means no chief executive, no chairman. The chairman does one sit-down interview a year. That's Al Mubarak, and that's with City TV, so obviously he can control the message and edit it, blah, blah, blah. And the reason why he does that, Guardiola, is so therefore it's always the message he wants out there. So what I'm saying is, this is another sign of a not very well-run club. Listen, that pales a little bit into to the greater issue, which I think the stuff he said is just it's not very nice. And I'm sure they exist, but have you ever come across a happy, kind of benevolent, generous billionaire? They've got all this money. They never seem to be that sort of at ease with themselves and the world. They always try to sort of like fix other people's lives as if they're not better. And it's like this old thing, if you want to change the world, maybe don't do that. Just sort of change yourself a little bit, look at yourself a little bit. And it just makes me laugh a little bit that money is held up. And of course, we all need money. Don't get me wrong. I'm not being that sort of unrealistic. But it seems like the richer people are, and I'm stereotyping a little bit, potentially, but these sort of billionaires that are in the public eye, I don't know, are any of them really sort of kind, generous? And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean with the money. I just mean with the way they are towards other people. They just don't seem to be particularly... and I always think if someone isn't particularly sort of benevolent or warm, that's probably because they're not that happy themselves. So anyway, I mean, to go back to the sort of the football side of it, I mean, Michael Carrick is very good at, at sort of just being calm and, so I'll be staggered if he sort of says anything that's potentially not controversial, but you know what I mean? Sort of like, you won't be wanting to, even though it's difficult for him, I think what he will say, it'll be worked out with the club. And now the club has put out that statement, it's a bit easier for him to sort of say, well, as a club, we welcome all, he'll probably just reflect that message in some sort of way. But if you've got anything about you, privately, if you're Michael Carrick, got anything about you, you're not happy because you're thinking, basically what we're all saying, what are you doing? Why? Why do you think, people are allowed to think what they like, but sometimes what they think is sort of damaging to themselves, really. It just makes Ratcliffe look, I'm going to be generous, a bit unfortunate, and I'm being polite,
Yeah.
I don't want to be sort of nasty or rude or cutting too much, but so I mean, it's good that you apologise, but as you said, I was thinking apology when I'm sorry if I offended. That's not an apology. Or how about just I'm sorry for saying that I got the facts wrong.
Yeah,
I was wrong about the facts.
Yeah,
and I've learned. How about that? I mean, people might respect it a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think again, touching on the football side, in the interview, he kind of mentioned, we've had to make difficult decisions at Manchester United and they're starting to pay off. Obviously easy to say after a few wins with Michael Carrick as interim manager. So Steve, your statement really did focus on that football aspect of his comments, right? So do you want to talk a little bit more about that? And, I spoke to you on Friday last week and, it's fair to say you were pretty pissed off because you were getting a lot of backlash that your statement focused on the football. So tell us about, why you kind of stuck to that narrative and focused on that area and the backlash, how that made you feel.
I mean, effectively, that statement went out off the back of Chris Wheeler I'd spoken to, firing some questions. Now, bearing in mind that this is everything's happening at 100 miles an hour. I haven't even got home from work, da-di-da-di-da. And, we threw together a statement based on what Chris asked us, which, we covered a little bit of it. You look at Musk's statement, it was, a little bit, because I think when stuff starts going out that gets political, whatever your views are, somebody else will disagree.
Yeah.
So you have got to be careful with that. I think, unfortunately, because of the sort of the immigration side of it, that we didn't address that within our press statement, then we get the usual faceless trolls on social media coming back to the stereotypical we're racist and this. And yes, when we spoke, I'm dealing with that left, right, and centre, and it's just like I can put up with. I knew when I put my face out to be, a contact, if you will, for the 1958, because prior to me doing this, everything was sort of underground and nobody knew who anybody was. And I understood the importance of it happening. And I also understood that, there may well be backlash with that, but I care more about the football club and what's happening with it than I actually do about some faceless idiots on Twitter who, want to get out there and create a scene. But I think what really gripes me is the the cheap dig at calling us racist. I mean, last time we spoke, lads, I explained to you, I think, that my two stepkids are half Ghanaian. My wife's French. My stepdaughter is Indian, who's blessed us with our first grandchild. We couldn't be any more. And I've seen stuff with Anthony, my stepson, growing up, having issues, and I've grown up with it, dealing with stuff going on at school, and he's grown up since. He went through the angry stage, and he's moved on. Unfortunately, he's a Liverpool fan, but nobody's perfect. And then Caitlin, she's just turned 18 now, and she comes to games. When Mum can't make it, she'll come to games with us. She absolutely loves it. She loves the camaraderie within our meeting point. I think every set of fans have got a meeting point. She loves that, whether it's before a game or after a game. And I think the only thing that I would also touch on with this is, foolishly, Ratcliffe's words and comments, as damaging as they were, have galvanised this fan base. Unfortunately against him, but they have galvanised it. I've had conversations with Asif from the Muslim Supporters Club, and we're meeting up. I think at one point next week we're going to meet up to discuss. And I've heard the guys' interviews and I think annoyingly some people just don't get football, and there's one thing that is in a football ground, and certainly at Old Trafford, is there is no definition of colour of skin.
Yeah.
None. Absolutely none at all. Now, I can't speak for every football ground around the country, but I can say that where I sit, and I've sat in various areas of that ground, I've met you guys, and it just, it's a galvanisation that could really backfire on this idiot of a man that's turning this football club on its arse. He's dragging it through the gutter. It's just one, like you said, we'd have that glimmer of hope, 4 wins on the bounce, that last-minute equaliser against West Ham. All right, we go into a bit of downtime. Normally that downtime is like, thank fuck for that, there's no football for 2 weeks.
They can't stress us out.
Yeah, but no, it's like, damn, we're looking forward to the next. And then now here we are discussing this, and it's draining. It really is draining. It's soul-destroying.
Yeah, it's a great point you make about, when you're inside that stadium, when you go through them turnstiles, or when you get into the vicinity of Old Trafford, doesn't matter where you're from, who you are, what colour you are, we're all there for a common cause. And if anything, I think we touched on this on our pod, Jamie, football is like escapism, from our everyday lives, from politics. Like, you go to football because you can escape that nonsense. And Jim has basically brought politics into football, and obviously within the fan base you're clearly going to have differing views on the politics, so it's just unnecessary, and the fact that he can't see that easily is really, really worrying. So Jamie, I want to touch on the Glazers, because I've read a few reports that they are horrified by Jim's comments, and I don't think it's because their grandparents are Jewish immigrants in the US. I think it's more because of the commercial impact it's going to have on the club. So yeah, any like wind you're getting of their feelings, or even just like, yeah, what you think, like how they would take this?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously don't know, I've not had it because no one talks to them, of course, exactly what they're thinking. I'd like to think that any decent human being, for me, right, this isn't even a question of politics. I think it's a question, but I don't want to sound too sort of, so if I'm like morally superior, but of what's right and wrong. Yeah, I think that for me is kind of what, that's what I always boil it down to a little bit. If you want to go into politics, what's right, what's wrong, what do I'll get things wrong all the time in life, of course I do. But so in this case, I'd like to think that they looked at that and thought, and maybe because of their background, they will have horrible personal family experience, so, because of their heritage, because of who they are, where their family's from, and almost definitely what their the sort of antecedent family members went through. So I'd like to think it was because of that. And I am sure, because I've done this, if Jim Ratcliffe did a DNA test, the thing where you could sort of look at, DNA. So my wife got me this kit, and it turns out I'm 48% Scottish, 1% Irish, and the other 50 or whatever it is, I'm like from the Caucasus, which is like sort of Turkey, Iran, Iraq,
Oh,
right?
wow. Okay. Yeah.
I see most people in the, Ratcliffe, I'm guessing if you went back far enough, because, and again, that's why I sort of made a bit of a joke, but it sounds a bit cheesy, but I don't think actually, I think it's quite important. I think once you start thinking about yourself as just from this earth, and we're only here for sort of 70 or 80 years, it baffles me that people sort of seem so unhappy, like, as I'm sort of saying, some of these billionaires, that they want to go around sort of saying, well, I was a benefits kid, right? I was single parent family, social security, and I'm so grateful for the chance that it gave me, the sort of support that it gave my family. And yeah, I know, you sort of said 9 million people on benefits. Yeah, I get it. There'll be some people on there who are probably cheating the system, but you're telling me there aren't rich people who cheat the system. Just because you have some people who take advantage of something doesn't mean to say that the core idea is wrong. In a way, it even makes the core idea stronger, because you sort of say, well, yeah, we're still going to do this because we believe that most people are good and they deserve a chance, they deserve some support when they need it most. And listen, I don't know for sure, but I think if Ratcliffe actually sat down and thought through this, and I actually said to you, Steve, I know why you laughed it, but when I spoke to you outside Old Trafford, the reason why I said to you, oh, would you like to talk to him, is because I know he's not going to do it, but I bet you if he actually was forced to sit and listen to you and sort of understand you, and I admire you for what you do, because I know it's not easy. When I saw the reaction to your statement, you're talking about being accused of rape, I was dismayed. I was like, wow. Someone's here trying to fight for something that they really believe in. They're not being paid. They're doing it because they love something. They've got a passion. And there's a certain reaction which says, oh, this person's X, Y, and Z, because they haven't mentioned what it's just such a shame. And so, someone like Ratcliffe, a lot of that, I think, and this is, you say about the Ineos people try to close down the interview. This is half the problem. They're not all the time around kind of different sets of people and listening to sort of different point of views. So that, they get sort of stuck in a mode of thinking, which is like unfortunate. If you just had, if they were just exposed, that's the word. If they were just exposed to sort of,
normal
listening
people.
to this,
the real world.
Yeah, wait a minute. What am I doing here? What am I? I don't need to think.
Jamie, last year there was a clip, like it hasn't done the circles on social media yet, but it was a clip I saw last year. Jim Ratcliffe and Dave Brailsford, they were going for a mix zone, and so a journalist was shouting out to Jim. I can't remember what it was about, and Jim nearly went over to the journo, and Dave Brailsford pulled him away. Do you remember that clip? That is what Jim Ratcliffe is like, especially since he's been at Manchester United. I happen to have actually followed him for a little bit, because when he was when he invested at Mercedes F1, like, I got to know his name. Obviously heard he's a Manchester United fan, he's a billionaire, we want to get rid of the Glazers. It sounded like, me, Steve's, we talked about it before, like, tick boxes, potentially there's something there. Since he's come in, it's been an absolute disaster in terms of what he says publicly. I don't think Ineos have a handle also from a media perspective of Manchester United. Like, they can't control the narrative because Jim says whatever he wants. And obviously, even with the interviews, even with the Gary Neville one, you remember when Gary talked about, why couldn't you have a charity dinner with Bruno Fernandes and Harry Maguire, raise the 40 grand? And Jim's response was, well, nobody suggested that. I mean, for crying out loud, who are you surrounding yourselves with then, right? In terms of the staff at, Manchester United with Ineos in particular. So, like, I don't know if he's got yes men around him, just generally it looks like it. But, like, this is a big problem. And even from a social perspective, he's a billionaire. So does he have any clue, even at our level, in terms of what we want and what we do on a daily basis? Does he even have a clue about the people who are on benefits and the lives that they live, right? To your point, yes, some people will be cheating the system, but there's probably a good case that, quite a few of them actually need, the social care or the welfare state money that they're on. So for him to say things like, yeah, it's costing too much. We've seen this before with what he did with the staff. He's canned nearly 500 people at Manchester United. There's, articles going now in the commercial department about the fact that we can't even fly people out to go and meet, global partners like we can before. So that's why we're struggling with certain sponsorship deals. Like there was a deal, I think, with Marriott that wasn't renewed recently. So do you know what I mean? It's like it's all interlinked with Jim Ratcliffe. And, we've said it before. It's like they claim that it's a team with like Omar Barada making decisions, Jason Wilcox making sporting decisions, but we know it's all underpinned by Jim Ratcliffe, right? Whatever he says, they do. They've spent £37 million on compensation on Ten Hag, Dan Ashworth, and Ruben Amorim. Speaks for itself.
I think also just touching on that is, I think his arrogance would almost lead him to think that if somebody wants to sponsor Man United, then they'll come and knock on our door. And that's the one thing, and it is probably the only one thing I could ever give the Glazers any credit for, was how they commercialised football. I don't know if you've the story about the Black Box, where they actively, there was the first ever football club that they had these amazingly prestige black boxes put together with a football shirt in it, with a photo album of historic moments. But what they did was, whoever they sent it to as a company, they embossed that shirt with their logo. They put their logos on the shirts of all these moments, and they painted the pictures and sold the dream, and people were falling over the club to sponsor us. I mean, I think the damage and the fallout from this, who in the right mind right now, if they was considering throwing money at Man United through sponsorship, it would be an absolute, it's a minefield at the minute, isn't it? Who would even consider it? It's suicide to me.
Steve, actually, on that point, you remember your meeting with Richard Arnold at the pub? Didn't he tell you that actually protesting does make a difference? Because the partners in particular, they don't like it, right? Whether it's image perspective or like I think we have done it in the past where fans have pillared ratings online and stuff like that, right? So even Richard Arnold's told you like protesting or like the impact, right? So imagine when you got, a shareholder saying what he said to a global audience when we need global sponsorship, it's hugely damaging, like commercially, right? Like that's not the biggest point, obviously, but just saying from a club perspective, it's terrible.
All a backlash to what was said, though, isn't it? That's that's the whole point behind it. And this guy, to me, he's a walking disaster, absolute walking disaster. And I think for the very little we've heard out of his mouth publicly, I actually think he's a vile human being. I don't think he's got any moral compass whatsoever. For whatever his reasons, maybe his wealth can dictate that he doesn't need to have any interaction with anybody else in the real world. But that's how he's perceiving himself. And whether he likes it or not, he is. When he put himself in front of Man United to run the sporting aspect of it, and I've heard from quite a few sources that Jim Ratcliffe, he will run everything. Barada, Wilcox, everybody else, he has the last say in everything. And that is extremely worrying.
This podcast is sponsored by Go Play Sports, the brand new mobile app changing the game for grassroots. Whether it's Sunday League or five-a-side, Go Play Sports makes it easy to track attendance, manage teams and cut out the manual admin. No more endless group chats, no more chasing payments, just turn up and play. Go Play Sports. Download now from your app store.
Jamie, just want to touch on the stadium because we've talked about this. I think, in fact, when I first met you, I think I was saying about moving that fucking railway line, and you mentioned meeting Andy Burnham, obviously, who's come out to condemn the comments. Again, we touched on it. Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer. These are people you need on the side, right? So surely this is not going to help the new stadium project, which to me looked unlikely anyway. But surely, he's just made it even harder, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that you know, that they would sort of be so appalled that the sort of politically, I think the issue they've got is it is supposed to be for the wider area, the sort of regeneration. By the way, just like any city, probably most towns and villages in our country, the sort of people he's slating, the immigrants, there'll be loads of people with heritage from elsewhere in that area. They're supposedly be benefiting. So there, even that itself makes what he's saying is absolutely ridiculous and not very nice. But yeah, I mean, this stadium is interesting. Sort of Steve touched upon. I'm not even sure they know the design of it. Because we had the sort of, if I call it the circus top thing, but apparently that might be in the balance, and there's no real date. The Burnham thing is sort of interesting because they put him up at maybe one of the very initial sort of public things about this in the press room at Old Trafford, and I had a bit of a sort of like, I don't know how you'd call it, but a little bit of forensic going over at Burnham, sort of saying about your point about the bridge, sort of saying, really, you're actually saying that you can't. It isn't within your gift, in essence, to sort of sort this track out if you really want. Because that was their argument of why they can't extend, the current Old Trafford or make it have. Because I was like, really, and he looked a little bit, and I didn't actually say to him. I was thinking, crumbs, but I did actually say to him, this guy's one of our richest people. Does he really need sort of public money? And I just kind of, behind that was, you're Labour, you're supposed to be sort of, I don't know how to say this, sort of for the right reasons in politics. And you're sort of like, you kind of, you're in partnership, or whatever we're going to call it, business, I don't know, with a guy here who doesn't, he's moved to Monaco. He's, to avoid all these taxes, he doesn't seem to contribute too much at the moment.
Yeah.
Then he's wanting government money. And I know since they're saying, no, it'll all be private money for the specific stadium, but it won't all. There's going to be a lot of benefits. Listen, if there wasn't any benefits for Jim Ratcliffe's sort of bottom line, he would not be interested in this stadium thing. He just wouldn't. As I said to you before, if you don't know the answer, it's money. You do know the answer, it's money. Do you know what I mean? Of course, there's going to be a wider regeneration. I don't know. It all feels a little bit Emperor's New Clothes, and you go back to, I don't know. I mean, Manchester United. The thing with Manchester United is a little bit like, I don't know, it's like it's like an institution. So part of what we're talking about here is because it's such a massive deal and so interesting and glamorous and got a global reach. This issue here, which is obviously awful, the ownership I'm talking about here, the Glazers and Ratcliffe, it kind of comes, it needs to be sorted out. But at the same time, it's a sign of what a big, it wouldn't happen at Chelsea. It wouldn't happen at Manchester City. I'm not even sure it'd happen at Liverpool. Yeah. That's the only club I'd really sort of put on a level with United in terms of titles. In terms of, you're sort of saying. So this is an unfortunate byproduct of what an amazing football club Manchester United is. And I just, I'm sort of 54. I'm just wondering if before the time I sort of, go to hell, whether this issue will be resolved and we'll have like a better ownership. Because it just seems to be going on forever and ever, but everything does end. And, maybe in 10 years' time, we'll all be looking back thinking, God, that wasn't very nice at all. Those sort of 20, 25 years of Glazers stroke Ratcliffe ownership. But now look at the club and it's in safe hands. Going back to the billionaires thing, surely there's a billionaire out there who not only is really nice, but would like to buy Manchester United and sort of like do the right thing. Where are they? Come on.
Bring them on. Yeah, no, it's a great point. And we're 20 years down the line with the Glazers, 2 and a bit years down the line with Ineos involved now. And Steve, it's funny because, we've obviously spoken a few times on this pod and, outside the pod, and, the protest pre the Fulham game, got good numbers and a good coverage. And, we were talking, post protest about, what's the next steps? And, we know the challenge is our fan base. We are divided sometimes in how we want to go about things, what we think about the owners, what we think about managers. But you mentioned it earlier. Has he actually galvanized our fan base? And almost in some ways, if the goal is to get the Glazers and Ineos out, has he done us a favour? Because we talked about the perfect storm. And if anything, he's just had a massive thunderstorm upon us over the last week.
I mean, the last protest was, I think everything we do now is, we've, over the 4 years we've been going, we've stayed, we've gained credibility, certainly with the media. We're trusted with the media, and, I suppose it's a flavour of story that the media have latched onto, which helps us no end, and we absolutely appreciate it no end. But I still think that the fan base, and certainly the match going fan base, I don't really know how much more. I was disappointed with the numbers for that. That's my personal. I was disappointed. I don't know. I don't know how bad it's got to get before people start thinking, right, hang on a minute. There are options for us to escalate protests and do other things, but you can't do it with a couple of thousand people. It's not possible. It'd just be a complete waste of time. And boycotting, going in late. We did it against Villa when we marched all the way from the town centre. We stayed out for 18 minutes. The few thousand that stayed out for that amount of time, it was live on Sky. We watched the game back, and the only reason that you knew something was going on is because there was actually wafts of the smoke flares, the green, yellow, red smoke flares actually wafting into the ground
Okay.
ever so slightly. We'd stopped in the tunnel to create that blockage safely, obviously, and in line with what GMP allow us to do. And one of our lads got punched in the face by someone that was desperate to get to his seat, and you think, what's sometimes why, just why? But I understand there's a lot of people go to Old Trafford as a one-off. They spend a hell of a lot of money. They spend a lot of money traveling from all over the world, and that's great. I've said it on numerous occasions. There's enough room for hospitality and, horrible term, but legacy fans to be in every single football ground in the country. %. No issue with the hospitality. But what we have got is we've got 50,000 or just shy of season ticket holders. So, where are these people? Are these people not worried about what they're seeing? Are they not worried about what's happening? Are they not listening to the words that are coming out of Ratcliffe's mouth? And it bamboozles me sometimes, because I get sort of questioned. Well, we didn't know what was happening, and it's like, okay, how we can spread the word any more than being all over national media prior to a protest, on TV, everywhere. We didn't even. I mean, I'd worked tirelessly with Sky at the last protest, the Fulham game, and we actually got an interview. We got together and did an interview, but sadly it was never heard because some fans decided it was comical to start chanting about Sky TV. And the camera, we asked politely, just give us 2 minutes. But, and sometimes that kind of mentality sort of shoots us in the foot, but it won't deter us and it won't stop us. We'll look at other avenues. We'll look at, probably what we've not done for a while is the online stuff, and certainly in light of what's happened, targeting sponsors, etc. And that's something where every fan can get involved. So your online fan base, it's what we did previously was just set up an email template. All you had to do was copy it, put in the email addresses supplied, where to send it to, and away you go. So, there'll be options. We've not decided if and what we're going to do for our next home game. I believe it's a couple of weeks away. As of Sunday, I'm away for a few days, so it'll certainly won't be entering my head until I'm back. But yeah, we shall see how.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I think, sometimes it's probably hard for you to see the progress because you're in the thick of it. But even just like you mentioned there, you're planning a meeting with the Muslim fan group, and also there was a unity statement, I think, that came out on Friday between yourselves and Must, right? So that's steps in the right direction in terms of trying to unify the different parts of our support.
Yeah, absolutely massive. I mean, the unity charter we've been working on behind the scenes for a hell of a long time. And I think just through timing of stuff we've been doing, stuff that must have been doing, and it's taken forever. But I would say by no particular side's fault, it's just taken a long time. But we've agreed that we will. We're not. This is not us becoming one voice. We will work together, and that's the main thing, because our football club has always lived on division within the fan base. They love it. I'm sure there'll be people at Manchester United watching the backlash we get online from supposedly Man United supporters, and whatever it is that they're moaning about. That division is what gives the club hope. Whether it's the racism, whether it's you need to do more, and it's quite comical because they're usually faceless accounts that come up with this. And, the old motto, do as I say, not as I do. And it's like, well, get involved. If you've got some ideas, get in touch. But
Yep. And
we don't hear from them.
We'll definitely be speaking offline, Steve, because we discussed
Well, we
some
already
ideas.
have on a few things.
Yes.
On
exactly.
a few things. So
yeah, exactly.
We'll get that
So
moving.
it's a war, not a battle. Let's put it that way. So let's see how it transpires. Ash, I'm going to let you close here. We need to let Jamie go soon. He's on a sabbatical. So I think you've got a final closing point you'd like to make.
Well, I mean, it was just like echoing some of what the lads said. Like in terms of the Andy Burnham, Keir Starmer angle, I do wonder actually, has there been talks behind the scenes where the public money won't be available, and that's why Jim's motivation, as well as politically, was also to put pressure and also like potentially align himself with future governments. I'm not going to mention the names. They don't need the PR, but I do wonder. There's that angle in terms of what he said to provoke a reaction. Because you said it as well, right? Ed Conway from Sky, he said Ineos tried to shut down that interview. So, I mean, in terms of like what's been said, it's disgraceful, and we hope that we can move past this, keep protesting. I think the online protesting is definitely a way to go forward, because we need to hit them in the pocket if we can't do it, by protesting like in stadiums. And we just need to make sure that we can do everything we can. Like, one thing I was surprised in terms of when Jim said what he said, I didn't actually expect the reaction like to be as aggressive towards him, which I'm happy about, obviously, because he's run this club, like a shit show for the last couple of years. And also like, the support even from like the football community, just generally towards Manchester United fans, the players, the Manchester United staff, because I think the lads have already touched on it. It's a diverse staff as well, right? And we're not just talking about the office people, we're talking about the stewards, the people who, behind the scenes in hospitality. We've seen these faces, right? And they're not the faces that Ratcliffe seems to want in this perfect world of his. So, we will keep fighting. And, I can only say, Steve, it's only fair if you have like the final closing words.
Well, I was just looking at that portrait behind you, a certain Eric Cantona, right? And I believe, his background, I think is it his grandparents, immigrants in Spain, I want to say, but I think he's come out even and, put some posts out against what Jim's done. So it's just everywhere you look, the people that are against what Jim has said, it's clear for me, so I don't really need to add to it. I'm like you said, Ash, I'm happy with the backlash because it adds fuel to the fire that we're trying to create and getting these owners out. So watch this space, I'd say. Let's see how this end of season goes. We want Carrick to do well. We want to get in the Champions League, but we will be working behind the scenes to try and get these owners out. May not happen, but we will certainly try. So thanks for joining us on this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.